Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's great to see everybody. As we begin today's program, I'd like to recognize and thank our very own Clay Motley. Clay is our digital media specialist, who's providing the music for us today. Thank you, Clay. It was wonderful. Clay is a man of many talents, none of which I have. Again, thank you very much for being here. Today we celebrate one of our greatest benefactors, Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans, and we get to honor Christopher M. Carney, who is the 2024 Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans Award recipient. This award for distinguished leadership service is Westminster Canterbury's highest honor. In addition to Chris and his family, we have some special guests with us today. I'm going to ask you to please hold your applause until I finish announcing all their names, and then we'll celebrate them together. Here with us today we have the Reverend Steve McGehee. He's the Westminster Canterbury Foundation Board's Vice Chair. We also have Angie Phelan, who is the Westminster Canterbury Corporate Board Chair. We have several trustees from the Westminster Canterbury Corporate and Foundation Boards with us. Please raise your hand if you're a current or former trustee, and thank you for being with us. All right, great. It's good to see so many of you. Thank you. We also are really excited to welcome our special guest speaker today, Dr. Danny Avula, who will spend time with us today talking about the future of healthcare. We recognize former Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans Award recipients. If you or your spouse are a former Lettie Pate Award winner, please raise your hand. Excellent, thank you. Thank you all for being here. We're also honored to have with us today Herbert Hobie Claiborne III, trustee of the Lettie Pate Whitehead Foundation. Now, let's give all of them a really warm round of applause. Now, Dan Stackhouse, Vice President of Resource Development, will tell you the story of Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans, whose birthday and legacy we celebrate today.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon. So it's really almost a cliche to say that small seeds, nurtured, loved, and well-fed, can grow into bright, beautiful life. But sometimes cliches stand the test of time. Letitia Lettie Pate, her early life was that of a small seed struggling to grow in challenging soil. Born in 1872 in Thaxton, Virginia, she was the child of loving parents who struggled to make ends meet after the Civil War. But they nurtured young Lettie with education and an upbringing in the Episcopal Church, feeding her with the values that would come to be a hallmark of her life in later years. As she grew, love found Miss Pate in the form of Joseph Whitehead, an attorney from Mississippi. They married and settled in Tennessee, soon welcoming two sons, Joseph Brown Whitehead Jr. and Conkey Pate Whitehead. So it was in Tennessee that comes my personal favorite part of the Whitehead family story. Joseph Whitehead saw Coca-Cola being a huge hit at soda fountains and drugstores and thought, I bet we could put that in bottles. It was an idea that had never been tried. Mr. Whitehead and his business partner traveled to Atlanta, where they pitched the idea to Asa Candler, the president of Coca-Cola. In words that must surely have stung when reflected on over the years, Mr. Candler declared it a preposterous idea and sold them the rights to bottle Coca-Cola for the grand sum of $1. Small seeds, indeed. This small investment, along with a huge amount of work, of course, paid dividends and business boomed. But the hard work would take its toll. And just 12 years after marrying, Joseph contracted pneumonia and died. Lettie Pate Whitehead, now a widow with two young sons, in the midst of her grief, planted another seed that grew into a bold, audacious plan. As a woman in the early 20th century, it would have been easier, certainly recommended, for her to give up on her husband's dreams, sell the company, and focus on being a mother. But that was not Mrs. Whitehead's way. In 1906, she took her husband's place at the head of Coca-Cola bottling and related interests. And under her leadership, they did not just survive, they thrived. By the time she sold her company to Coca-Cola years later, she had more than 1,000 franchisees bottling and selling the refreshing drink, expanding her fortune that would benefit so many others. Small seeds growing into big ideas. As her businesses grew, Lettie found love again. In 1913, she married Colonel Arthur Kelly Evans and settled in Hot Springs, Virginia, where Mrs. Whitehead became an active member of the community. It was there that she struck up a friendship with her neighbor, Mr. Hobie Claiborne Sr. Remembering her elderly female members of her family who grew up without formal education and financial insecurity, she asked Mr. Claiborne for suggestions on how to help older women in his hometown of Richmond, Virginia. It is because of this seed of a conversation that we are celebrating this day today. And I'm pleased to say that Mr. Claiborne's legacy lives on at Westminster Canterbury. As you heard, we are joined today by his grandson, Hobie Claiborne III, and his granddaughter, Mary Frediani, chairs our foundation board. Mr. Claiborne suggested that Mrs. Evans support the Protestant Episcopal Church home in Richmond, and she fast became an important benefactor and friend to the home. Upon her death, she left a financial gift as well as furnishings, china, and silver, which can now be found in our own Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans room. And when Westminster Canterbury opened in 1975, the ladies of the Protestant Episcopal Church home were the first to move in. Mrs. Evans' generosity planted the seed that would grow into the fellowship program that we so cherish today. Small seeds into life-changing support. Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans' later life was marked by tragedy, losing her sons in 1935 and 1940. Influenced by their parents' generous example, in their wills, they created foundations to honor their parents, including the Lettie Pate Whitehead Foundation, which has helped Westminster Canterbury Richmond so much over the years. Mrs. Evans herself left her estate to the Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans Foundation, which she started. The legacy of Mrs. Evans' generosity can be seen at schools, art institutions, colleges and universities, and communities like ours all throughout the Southeast. In fact, as some of you may know, I just before coming here spent about 10 years working at the New Community School just across the way here, where they help bright students with dyslexia succeed. And for decades, the Lettie Pate Whitehead Foundation has provided scholarship support to young ladies over there as well. Small seeds blooming into bright futures. Here at Westminster Canterbury, our fellowship program truly has no greater friends than Mrs. Evans and the Lettie Pate Whitehead Foundation. Since 1976, the foundation has contributed over $14 million to our fellowship program. And I am so excited by the timing of this. During lunch today, while we were celebrating Chris Carney, John Burns and I got an email from the Lettie Pate Whitehead Foundation letting us know that for 2024, they are going to be contributing $813,500 in support to fellowship this year. The timing of that is just so sweet. I absolutely love it. Because of them and the generosity of so many others, many of you in this room, we can uphold our promise to provide security and peace of mind to seniors in need, and pledge that no resident of Westminster Canterbury will ever have to leave for financial reasons that are through no fault of their own. This bedrock of generosity inspires everything that we do at Westminster Canterbury Foundation. So as I was reading about Mrs. Evans to prepare for today, I came across this quote about her from Atlanta lawyer. His name is Hughes Spalding. He said, "Great works of Christian charity do not come out of the blue like a stroke of lightning. They require the inspiration of a gentle and guiding hand. They require the tender touch of goodness implanted in their hearts by a deep sense of obligation to our neighbor and by the love of God. Mrs. Evans makes it her business to go about the world doing good. Today, we are proud to celebrate Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans just a few days shy of her 152nd birthday. Her spirit of generosity has planted seeds of opportunity throughout our region, and especially right here at Westminster Canterbury Richmond. Seeds that blossom in the hearts of all of us here today. Thank you, Mrs. Evans. It is now my pleasure to introduce Angie Phelan, who is the chair of the Westminster Canterbury Corporate Board, who will now introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here today. We are honored to have with us today Dr. Danny Avula. He has served as the Commissioner of the Department of Social Services, appointed in early 2022. In his role, he oversees the agency's work to help stabilize families and give Virginians a way out of poverty. Before his current appointment, Dr. Avula became a trusted and respected voice of local public health during his service as the director of the Richmond and Henrico Health Departments. He led these localities through the worst of times of the COVID-19 pandemic, providing expert guidance at a time when the public desperately sought answers. In January 2021, Governor Northam appointed him as the State Vaccination Coordinator for the Virginia Department of Health, overseeing the COVID-19 vaccination effort. Under his guidance, Virginia became one of the top 10 states for vaccination rates. Dr. Avula is a public health physician specializing in pediatrics and preventive medicine. After graduating from the University of Virginia, he earned his medical degree from the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine. He completed residencies at VCU and Johns Hopkins University, where he also earned his Master's of Public Health degree. He is an affiliate faculty member at VCU. As a member of the State Board of Social Services from 2013 to 2021, and he served as the board chair from 2017 to 2019. He is also the former board chair of the Richmond Memorial Health Foundation, recipient of the Virginia Center of Inclusive Communities Humanitarian Award, a 2019 Richmond Times-Dispatch Person of the Year honoree, and was named Styles Weekly Richmonder of the Year 2020. His work has been featured nationally by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, MSNBC, and the New York Times, National Public Radio, and more. Dr. Avula, thank you for speaking with us today. We know our award winner, Chris Carney, has expertise at envisioning the future. With that in mind, we look forward to hearing from you about future trends in healthcare.
Well, hello, Westminster Canterbury friends. It's wonderful to be back with you all. As Angie mentioned, I spent a lot of time here in 2020, and hopefully all of you were hiding in your rooms somewhere, so we didn't see each other very much. But then John was kind enough to have me back, I think late 21 or 22, I can't remember, but to speak at an event like this to talk about some of what that COVID experience had looked like. But I'm so pleased to be here today to celebrate Chris Carney. Chris has been you'll hear more about this, but he has been a remarkable force in health and healthcare in the Richmond region for over 40 years. Our work has overlapped at different times. You probably don't remember this, but one of the first times we met, I was, trying to pitch this sort of grandiose idea of something that we were going to accomplish at the health department. And Chris pulled me aside afterwards and he said, the ideas are good, but you really need to figure out how you're going to execute. And that has stuck with me, because I think what Chris is really known for is a guy who gets things done. He's a man on a mission who knows how to get things done. And so he has left that legacy for me and so many other health leaders in Richmond. So thank you, Chris. All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of health, public health, healthcare. There's overlap in all of those things. As Angie mentioned, I am a clinician by training, but I've served most of my career as a public health physician, which means that once a month I will do an overnight shift at Chippenham Hospital where I get to actually see real patients and I'm a pediatrician, so I admit kids to the floor and I manage them in the hospital. But that is the toe that I keep in clinical medicine. The rest of my time is really thinking big picture about how do we keep populations and communities healthy. And COVID was probably the biggest and most intense example of that. But I want to share a lot of what I'll talk about in terms of the future of public health will be done in kind of the aftermath of COVID, because I know while all of you don't really want to hear more about COVID, it is what I was subjected to for the better part of 2 years. And this was my life. I mean, for almost every day for periods of those 2 years, it was daily media, it was daily town halls, education sessions for institutions like this and schools and so many others across the region. There was at one point, my snarky children sent me this photo. This is 3 of my 5 kids who took a selfie in front of me on the TV because there were stretches of time where they saw more of me on TV than they did at home. But despite all of that, it was by far the most meaningful season of my career, and the opportunity to work with folks like you all. John and his team were such incredible models and partners in their response in keeping you all safe. I mean, it was really, really inspiring. So, post-COVID, I want to talk a little bit about what is changing, what do we have to look forward to, and what did this COVID season actually do to accelerate health and healthcare in Virginia and beyond. So the first thing I'll talk about briefly is vaccine technology. Vaccination was a pretty polarizing subject through COVID, but one of the things that was real was that the whole world spent billions of dollars in a very defined time frame to get an outcome. And they did that. They were able, really, the fastest that it's ever happened, they were able to generate an effective vaccine against COVID. And it saved millions of lives. So that technology, one of the specific types of technology, that mRNA technology, has actually led to even more recent vaccine advancements, right? We just had, this past year, the first FDA-approved RSV vaccine, the respiratory syncytial virus. For most of us, RSV is a very mild cold, but as a pediatrician, it is the #1 reason that young kids, infants, get hospitalized. And so having an effective vaccine against RSV is going to save kids' lives. It's going to save hospitalization utilization dollars. So it's a really impactful technology. But another advancement in vaccine technology is the use of nanoparticles. And so one of the things that just got published in the last couple of months is a nanoparticle vaccine that is safe in humans and that accelerates the production of a particular immune cell. That immune cell is the precursor to a cell that produces neutralizing antibodies against HIV. Right? We've been grappling with HIV since the 80s, trying to figure out how we will address and treat and prevent this disease. That's still, there's about 1.5 million new cases of HIV globally every year. And while we've figured out well how to manage it, we are now a huge step closer to actually being able to prevent it through a vaccine. The next thing I want to talk about is telemedicine. Now, this isn't really future, right? Because you guys all have probably had your own experience with telemedicine. I will say that COVID really accelerated that, right? A lot of the restrictions on payments and on security that previously existed went away during COVID. We still found ways to keep people's data safe, but it really opened the doors to providers learning how to use this and patients learning how to use this. And so I imagine many of you in this room have had some experiences with telemedicine, but I think that is just the beginning of a new way that we are all going to interact with healthcare. So here's an example of a chatbot where someone might wake up one morning not feeling very well, enter that information into a chatbot. This artificial intelligence, AI-infused chatbot will run through its algorithm and produce directions or next steps that you might be able to take. Now, as this technology gets better and better, that's going to reduce the number of interactions that people have with a real human physician. And there are upsides and downsides to that, and that's one of the things as we venture into the future of healthcare that we're really going to have to reckon with. Where is that doctor-patient interaction vital, and how do we make sure that we maintain that while dealing with the reality that we do not have anywhere near enough primary care physicians or providers to meet the primary healthcare needs of our population? Additionally, the technology is getting better and better, and what you can do through a phone or through a wearable ring or through sensors that are implanted in shoes or shirts is pretty amazing. And so I want to show you just this brief video that describes a little bit of what an interaction might look like.
I woke up in the morning with a sore throat. I immediately turned to my voice assistant to ask for help. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Bertolin. How can I help you today?
I think I have a sore throat. What should I do?
That doesn't sound good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
Could you point the camera at your throat?
Sure.
You have a sore throat. Nothing serious. You should have a fruit salad and a yogurt for vitamin intake, chamomile tea with honey and throat drops for easing the pain.
Oh, thank you.
I will monitor your vital signs through your skin patch, and if I discover any change, I will make an appointment to your doctor.
Shall I work today?
It would be best for you to rest. But don't worry, we will take care of this together. You are in good hands.
Wow. Chatbots will be the first line of primary care in a decade. They will be able to respond to simple medical questions with useful advice. They can track patients' health, parameters, and help make sense of their data. They support medication management and give recommendations about drugs. In some cases, chatbots can also connect patients with clinicians for diagnosis or treatment.
Wild to think about, isn't it? All right, the next thing, I mentioned wearable technology as a part of the technology that's advancing interactions like that. Many of you probably have Fitbits or Apple Watches or wearing these Oura rings that actually have sensors on them. And so as the artificial intelligence gets better and better and finds the right combination of increased heart rate, increased respiratory rate, and increased body temperature, that can give you a flag that you need to go and be seen immediately. And so these are the kinds of things that we're going to be seeing more and more in the healthcare space. Another big topic of conversation in health and human services is really this concept of data modernization, because all of those wearables we just talked about are generating billions and trillions of points of data. And we have technology that's getting better and better at interpreting what those things mean. But that also has implications in what we do in the public health space. So many of you may remember from the COVID era that when you maybe were diagnosed with COVID or maybe were exposed to somebody, we went through something called a case contact investigation, right? And we had to scale up. The federal government put millions and millions of dollars to build up public health infrastructure. We had to hire people basically off the street to be able to run call centers to do case contact investigations. And some of that work is core work that public health departments have done long before COVID. We do it in the context of sexually transmitted infections. We do it in the context of nursing home associated norovirus outbreaks or flu outbreaks. We actually have epidemiologists who ask people the questions about where have you been and what food did you eat and who did you come into contact with in an attempt to really prevent the spread of that disease, to prevent transmission. So now we are already seeing examples, and this technology is just going to accelerate light years in the years ahead, where chatbots can actually do all of that work for you. And this is timely because we are also in the midst of a public health workforce crisis. And so as we think about the future, I'll just give an example from my world now in social services. We had, so one of the things we do in social services is we run the Child Protective Services function for the state. So if somebody's concerned about neglect or abuse on a child, they will call a CPS hotline and make a complaint. A social worker then assesses the safety of that child. Now, one of the things that has happened in recent years is that the number of calls has shot up, but the number of staff to maintain those calls has not changed at all. And so people experience long wait times before somebody actually responds. My wife, who is a kindergarten teacher in the Richmond Public Schools, has at times had to call the CPS hotline and nothing has come of it. And it's really frustrating because there aren't staff, there isn't capacity to go and do the assessment that those families really need to be done. 2 years ago, the Inspector General's office looked at the social services system in Virginia and said, if we wanted to staff CPS appropriately to manage that volume of calls, we would need 1,300 more CPS workers. Now, in what planet are we ever going to get an infusion of dollars to build that kind of capacity? And even if we had it, where would we find the people to do it? And so we really have to think about how do we integrate technology and process to fill the gaps that humans previously filled and allow humans to do the really important client, patient-facing work that we need them to do. And so these are a lot of the things that we're thinking about. How do we use technology to do the baseline case contact investigation so that the epidemiologists can do the harder analytical work? Another interesting example is in wastewater surveillance. So this started happening during COVID, where this is an aerial view of wastewater tanks, if folks are trying to figure out what this is, but where COVID and other viruses like it are actually shed through your waste. And so you can monitor the wastewater for certain markers and tell when there's a community that might be seeing an uptick of COVID because you're starting to see viral shedding in their waste. Similarly, there are also markers for things like opioid use and all kinds of other medication overdose attempts, as an example. And so public health is really starting to figure out how do we write algorithms and build sensors to look at wastewater to be able to track an overdose or a cluster of opioid usage to a particular community. So this is the kind of technology, again, that is emerging and that will be much more part of our practice in the next 5 to 10 years. Another post-COVID reality has been what has been termed the infodemic. You guys probably saw a lot of things on the media, on your social media if you're on it, on the news, and probably had some difficulty trying to figure out what's true and what's not. What can I believe? And it has kind of it's birthed this field that the World Health Organization now calls infodemiology, which is public health's approach to figuring out how do we counter misinformation and disinformation. During COVID, social media was a huge part of how information was getting out there. And at some point in early 2021, the Center on Countering Digital Hate actually did a 2-week study of all of the social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and related to COVID. And they sorted it all out, and they figured out which of that information was true, which of the information was misinformation, which is information that is just mistaken unintentionally, and which of that information is disinformation, which is often stoked intentionally by bad actors. And what they found in this 2-week period of over 1 million different messages was that the misinformation and disinformation, 65% of those shares and posts originated with 12 specific accounts. 12 people who had intentionally put all of that bad information out into the social media world and really caused tons of confusion. And not just confusion for the folks who consume that on social media, but really have eroded trust in information writ large. And so this is one of the future issues that we're really going to have to tackle of how do you sift between what's true and what's not and restore trust in physicians, the CDC, and other trusted entities. One of my low points of the period that I served as state vaccination coordinator, how many of you know who Nicki Minaj is? Probably not in this crowd. A couple, all right, you guys are hip. So Nicki Minaj is a R&B singer, rapper, very famous pop star. And she has a Twitter account that has 2.2 million followers. And she posted this: "My cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and he became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married, and now the girl's called off the wedding. So just pray on it and make sure that you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied into it." So, this is an example of misinformation, right? Nicki Minaj doesn't know if this is true or not. I don't think she's intentionally trying to dissuade people from getting vaccinated. But the reality is that now 2.2 million people have seen this kind of anti-vaccine sentiment, when in reality, Nicki Minaj's cousin probably had chlamydia or gonorrhea or something like that caused this testicular swelling. So these are the kinds of things that we had to contend with during the pandemic, but really, this is going to be an ongoing issue for public health. How do we convey meaningful information that the public will consume and find to be true? This is just an analysis that Kaiser Family Foundation did of how people consumed information about COVID, and what you'll see is that in that list of people who would definitely not get the vaccine on the right side of your screen, there's two spikes, one in cable news and one in social media. And so this is where, part of the answer of what public health is going to do is really equip the populace on how to consume media. Maria Ressa, who was the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner, she is the CEO of a Filipino media company called Rappler, and really an inspiring woman. But in her acceptance speech for the Nobel Peace Prize, she said this: "Lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than facts," which is true. There have been a lot of studies to show that things that are not true, are the more salacious they are, the more provocative they are, the more shares and touches they get. Social media companies control our global information ecosystem, and they are biased against facts. They are, by design, dividing us and radicalizing us. And I think the same is true for cable media as well. You all probably consume some form. Some people watch Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. Some folks watch all of the above. Most people, though, really kind of look towards one particular news source. And so I'm going to, for a minute, just kind of get on my soapbox here about news media consumption, because news media has found its meal ticket, right? And that is to divide us and conquer us. They have to compete for audience, and that competition has changed the way that news, and particularly political news, is produced and consumed. So cable news is this huge business, and it runs on ads. And so if they're going to win viewers, they've got to engage viewers. And so the line between information and entertainment has gotten blurrier and blurrier, right? Fox News, the most watched cable network in the world, and it, over time, has provided less and less actual news and more opinions about the news, because that's what people get riled up by and engaged with. And MSNBC has done the same thing as the left-leaning counterpart to Fox News. And so, my urging to you all in this, future of public health, as we're trying to figure out how do we compete with the infodemic, is that we all have to become more clear-eyed about what is driving the media that we consumed. All right, off my soapbox. The next item of where the future of public health is really to restore trust. The CDC, as you all may remember, had some really big missteps during the pandemic, right? Masks or no masks. There's the fact that how quickly should the vaccine come out, and when are we going to use it? So many different changing areas of guidance, and it really confused a lot of people. And at the end of the day, I think people left saying, I don't know what I can trust anymore, but it's probably not the CDC. And so for months, there were thousands and thousands of these memes all over social media. The CDC says that COVID can have a little salami as a treat. Or the CDC now says you can drink at work if it helps you forget how short-staffed you are. Or the CDC just announced you don't actually have to wash your hands, just get the fingies a little wet, right? And so on and so forth. So many hilarious memes about how ridiculous the CDC is. But that is really vital work to restore trust in what had been the most trusted public health entity in the country. And so this is Mandy Cohen. She's the new director. And every talk she gives is about how we connect with people and restore trust. And so that is going to be one of the really difficult battlegrounds for public health moving forward. How do they become a trusted entity once again? And then the final one that I'll point to is, we touched on this, but it's the politics of public health, right? The COVID, more than any time that I can remember, really stoked the ends, right? Really stoked the polls of where people stood on this. And I think it really not only eroded trust in institutions, but eroded trust in each other as human beings. And so my hope as we think about the future of health, the future of public health, but really like the future of a flourishing community, is that we will all be clear-eyed about that we will understand what is being done to us because of what we are consuming and the way that this world is moving, and that we will choose to act differently. And I will finish where I started, which is that people like Chris have poured their life out for the advancement of health and the advancement of the flourishing of this community here in Richmond. And we've got to make intentional decisions to follow that lead and to do the same. And I hope that I will be a part of that moving forward. Thank you, Chris, for your legacy here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Avula. That was fascinating stuff. That is, I imagine you don't have a boring day very often. There's so much to consider and so many prongs of that attack, but thank you for helping to keep our community safe, and thank you for the good work that you do. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Wyatt Beasley, who is a Westminster Canterbury resident, as I'm sure you know, and a trustee of the Westminster Canterbury Foundation, to come forward and share just a few remarks about our award winner, Chris Carney. And after Dr. Beasley finishes his remarks, our Foundation Vice Chair, Steve McGee, will present the Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans Award. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I first met Chris Carney in the 1990s. He was the CEO of Bon Secours St. Mary's, and I was working primarily at Sturt Circle Hospital. Bon Secours purchased Sturt Circle Hospital, and Chris and I became good friends. It was then that I recognized that he had great leadership talents. He had the ability to make everyone feel appreciated. The person sweeping the floors at the hospital was just as important to the success of the hospital as the neurosurgeon doing surgery. This trait made everyone perform at a higher level. Chris has great vision and tremendous organizational abilities. Many groups have benefited from his skills, including the Virginia Eye Institute, Madaba, Crossover Clinic, and others. He's donated his time and talents to many organizations, including the American Heart Association, Richmond Memorial Foundation, Virginia Healthcare Foundation, and many more. His curriculum vitae reminds me of the New York Times Sunday edition. It never ends. We here at Westminster Canterbury have benefited from his leadership on the foundation. We all are familiar with a successful Vibrant Vision campaign that Chris led. You may not know, however, that Chris was a facilitator for our recent strategic plan. His advice and leadership led to a very important plan. Most importantly, he leads by example. As a board chair, he challenges the members to be more productive. He has a unique ability to introduce an idea, and at the end of the day, the committee members think it was their suggestion. It's interesting to me that Chris has come home. He was administrator of the Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital in the 1980s. We all know, and this room is one of it, many of our buildings are located on the psychiatric hospital grounds. So, Chris, you returned to your roots. Congratulations on receiving the Lettie Pate Whitehead Award. You deserve it. I cherish our friendship, and I thank you for your efforts in making our lives better here at Westminster Canterbury. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Given since 1985, the Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans Award is presented to leaders for outstanding dedication to the mission and advancement of Westminster Canterbury Richmond. Chris Carney has demonstrated a remarkable commitment to the Westminster Canterbury community as a passionate and persuasive advocate with steadfast dedication to the mission of Westminster Canterbury. There are few areas of this organization that have not been influenced by Chris's service. His knowledge and guidance have impacted our residents, trustees, employees, and friends. If you've worked here, you really feel like you know this guy. He's everywhere in this organization. When Chris began his service as a trustee of Westminster Canterbury Foundation, one of the first projects with which he was tasked was co-leading the 3.0 task force, established to envision the future of Westminster Canterbury Richmond and to plan for making this vision a reality. Chris's deep knowledge of the healthcare industry proved invaluable during this time. The final report from this work still provides guidance to our organization and was an integral building block for the strategic planning efforts of the Foundation and Corporation in 2014 and 2021. When Chris became the Foundation Board Chair in 2018, we were preparing for a significant fundraising initiative, later named Vibrant Vision. Chris was extremely helpful throughout the feasibility study. He helped envision and create the Vibrant Vision Campaign Leadership Cabinet, helped to recruit dynamic members, and played an integral leadership role throughout the campaign. Generosity to the Vibrant Vision Campaign exceeded the fundraising goal of $20 million, which was already the largest effort this organization had ever undertaken. We know this success is rooted in Chris's strong leadership from the campaign's beginning. After his time on the Foundation Board ended in January 2020, Chris continued to provide guidance to and to remain an advocate for Westminster Canterbury Richmond. In 2021, Westminster Canterbury Richmond embarked on a strategic planning process to guide the organization through the next 5 years and beyond. In seeking a professional to lead this effort, our leadership team immediately thought of Chris. Trustees and employees recalled his guidance and ability to mentor people of all professions in envisioning the future. His leadership for our strategic planning process in 2021 and 2022 was absolutely invaluable. His patient, careful guidance made the process approachable for the 77 trustees, employees, and residents who collaborated to form this strategic plan. In addition to Chris's service to Westminster Canterbury Richmond, he has generously shared his time and expertise with several other service organizations in Greater Richmond, including Virginia Healthcare Foundation, Richmond Memorial Health Foundation, the American Heart Association, and Crossover Healthcare Ministry. His service has touched the lives of countless individuals throughout our region. Westminster Canterbury is deeply grateful for the impact Chris has made in the lives of our residents, family members and employees, trustees and friends. His dedicated volunteerism here continues to inspire generosity, the true lifeblood and ethos of Westminster Canterbury. Build community and improve the lives of our residents and many in our region. This has inspired us to present Chris with Westminster Canterbury Richmond's highest honor, the Lettie Pate Whitehead Evans Award for distinguished service. Chris and John, will you please now join me on the stage? I did too. God bless you. Chris, on behalf of the entire organization and all the trustees, employees, residents of this wonderful place, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, if I'm standing up here and you're sitting out there, this must really be happening to me. As my wife Adrian would tell you, it took me quite some time after I was informed of this award to believe that it really happened to me, because I'm familiar with it, what it means for the legacy and for the future of Westminster Canterbury Richmond. To say that I was shocked would be an understatement. I'd like to begin by saying just one thought each to Dr. Avula and to Dr. Beasley. Danny, I remember very well the conversation to which you referred, because I reflected on it for quite some time. Was I too direct with Dr. Avula? Did I say more than I should have? But since you're still referring to it, perhaps the answer was no, I did not misstep. And to Dr. Beasley, whom I've known and worked with for many years, I was particularly touched by your reference to my fondness for, I'll paraphrase what you said, for being an example to others and being out there where care is delivered. Because to me, one of the hallmarks of servant leadership is to be where care is provided. And I've had the opportunity to do that in multiple settings over the years, including to be a part of Westminster Canterbury. So thank you both for being here and for your to me, very personal comments. My comments today will be divided into two parts. The first is to say thank you, and the second will be to share with you some of what I experienced during my 9 years or so with Westminster Canterbury Richmond. I want to say thanks to the corporate board and to the foundation board for inviting me back to be a part of their organization, and for their amazing stewardship of the many resources and assets of Westminster Canterbury Richmond. Thanks to leadership at all levels, going back to Don Leckie, John Burns, Gail Hageland, the cooperation and support that I received from senior leadership and from frontline leadership was absolutely amazing. To the boards of directors for your stewardship and your insight and your vision, thank you. We particularly benefited, especially during the strategic planning process, from the continued input of employees at all levels of the organizations, managers, frontline employees. The boards of directors were extraordinarily involved in helping us with volunteer recruitment, and the volunteers with whom I served, whether it was on task forces or committees, were exceptionally direct and helpful with the input they gave to us. And in the spirit of being direct, the input that we got from residents throughout every work that we did, it was direct, it was thoughtful, it was insightful, it was candid, and most importantly, we used the input we got from those people. In the perfect world, if we had the ability to put on stage everyone here with whom I collaborated, the entire stage would be filled and overflowing. That's the kind of organization that Westminster Canterbury is. So on a professional basis, I want to say thank you. And on a personal basis, and I have expressed these thanks in other settings, and I'm going to do it again today. Whatever value I was able to bring in my work life or my volunteer life would not have been possible without the support, the guidance, the advice, the patience that I got from my wife Adrian, who is seated in the first row. 3 weeks ago, yesterday, I believe it was, we celebrated our 55th wedding anniversary. So I won some type of award for Adrian for putting up with me. Adrian and I are joined by our son, Brian, his wife, Betsy, Betsy's mother, Nancy Greenway, our son, Alan, his wife, Mariah, Mariah's mother, Barbara Daniel. Adrian and I spoke with our daughter, Claire Weston, who lives in Columbia, South Carolina, unable to be with us today in person, but certainly here in spirit. My second topic is to talk with you and share with you what it was like to be a volunteer and to be an advisor to Westminster Canterbury Richmond. And I'll blend people and culture, because in my view, people are culture, and culture is driven by people. I experienced Westminster Canterbury Richmond to be welcoming, to be friendly, and to be inclusive. There's an organizational desire to ask more people to participate, more people to provide input, rather than fewer people. The organization is serious about what we ask them to do and their commitment to Westminster Canterbury's mission. There's an eagerness to make a difference. This is not an organization that is lackadaisical. It's not an organization that rests on current or past success. They want to make a difference. They want to know why and how can we do better than we are today. They're generous. I think people in advancement and development say if you're generous with your time, your talent, and your treasure. Gail, did I get that correct? If you're generous with those three things, it builds the foundation for future success in the organization. We laughed. We had the ability to joke with each other. And one of the things that I find particularly helpful in an organization, I noted throughout all the work that I did here, there's a preference and a pattern that people here use the pronoun we rather than the pronoun I. And in the work that I do, that makes a significant and positive difference. The organization demonstrates a continuing passion for innovation, especially during the strategic planning process. There were times when I said, I don't believe they're actually willing to take a look at improving something that has been part of the organization for so many years, and yet they were. That's who they are. They did not sit back and say, we cannot get any better. To the contrary, they said, we can get better and we shall get better. The organization believes in lifelong learning. They have an extraordinary ability to listen. And when something doesn't go well, which even John Burns would admit from time to time, things don't go exactly as we thought, the organization acknowledges that, talks about it publicly, and says, this is what we learned from this opportunity. Not a small matter was that they put up with me. And I can be a challenge, but I think that's what you asked me to do. The organization celebrates. This is part of that culture of celebration. They celebrate big and small, and it creates the sense of ownership and participation among those who participated. While today has focused on where we have been, although Dr. Avula did a magnificent job of talking about where we're going, I will say that whatever Westminster Canterbury has done in the past, it has an amazing and exciting future, and I hope that you are as enthused about Westminster Canterbury Richmond's future as I am. Thank you.
Congratulations, Chris. We're grateful for all the ways you've served Westminster Canterbury. On behalf of the boards, the executive team, myself personally, we're grateful for your gifts of time, expertise, and leadership. Chris, I'm also grateful to Chris because he was on the search committee that helped me make the decision to come here, which was the best decision I've made in my professional career. And in no small way, lunch with Chris and a couple other individuals is what helped me understand the level at which this organization was thinking about the future. And the 3.0 document that Chris had a big hand in was a big part of that. Chris has the uncanny ability to ask the hardest question anyone could come up with, which is the question we need to really ask in conversation. We talk about what we know or what we think we should know. Chris asks us in an inquisitive way the question that's really at the heart of the matter. And it can be cryptic and hard to sort of understand at times. But the thing that you come to learn very quickly is that Chris knows the answer. He's asking the question to help you learn what you need to know to move forward, both as a professional individual and as a group. And there's a talent there that very few people, in my experience, have had. The other insight I had is when Dr. Avula was talking and he told a story about Chris. I can really connect with that. Because a couple of us, Gail, Juan, Anita, probably Russell, have heard Chris say more than once, your ideas are good, but how are you going to do that? And that's really the heart of the matter is how do you put form around the idea so that you can make change? And that is a talent that very few of us have. And Chris has brought that to every meeting. He's made me a better leader. He's made everyone here that he's worked with a better leader. I want to also extend my appreciation to Dr. Avula. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate that you would take the time out of your busy day to come be with us. We're in debt for your leadership, and his counsel during tough times were there for us, and we appreciate that. I personally appreciated being able to talk to Danny when I needed to. And he did come and share his experiences with us, which helped make sense of our own in a way that there was about a 2-year period of all of our lives where finding some common ground was tough. And Danny had that view of we were all going through it, and we were all going through it together separately. And so that was helpful. Now I want to invite all of you to the reception in the Cochrane Commons, where you can take the time to congratulate Chris and talk with his family. Also enjoy some of our famous Lettie Pate Coca-Cola cookies made by our pastry chef just once each year, and you can have your fill of those. I want to ask that the audience please stay in your seats until our guests have been able to get up and get out towards the Cochrane Commons. But then please join us there. So thank you for joining us on this special day for Westminster Canterbury. Have a great afternoon, and thanks for coming.